When it comes to fantasy and sci-fi costumes, few events can compete with the annual DragonCon gathering in Atlanta, Georgia. Both master and novice costume creators alike gather to display their art and share tips and techniques with one another. This year, I was lucky enough to spend some time with a very talented and accomplished costumer named Genevieve. One of her new outfits this year was this intricate and imaginative steampunk fairy design. Despite her busy schedule of panels and posing, she took some time to explain a bit about how this particular costume came to life.
I'm Genevieve. I've been in costuming for about 7 years. I started with Lord of the Rings costuming, actually. The movies came out, and I was just so enthralled that I wanted to make a costume to go with it. So my very first costume was a Legolas costume. And at that point, I was hooked. I was in the hobby store one day, and I saw these brass rings. There were just dozens of them in all kinds of different sizes. And for some reason, I guess I'd been looking at books on Art Nouveau and that sort of thing lately, and I saw the brass rings, and wings instantly popped into my mind. But I didn't know what costume, what goes with brass rings for wings. And so I just sort of filed the thought away, thought, it's a cool idea, but I'll never do it. What would I use them for? And then this year, I decided to come to DragonCon after a hiatus of several years, and I was trying to think of costumes to do. I usually make replica costumes, but I wanted to do something purely creative that just came out of my own head. And lately, steampunk has been the in thing, with the whole Victorian pulp influence there. And when I was thinking I would like to make a steampunk costume, and so I was looking at steampunk research, and it's all about brass. Brass goggles, brass is the steampunk metal. And the brass rings popped back into my mind, and I thought, steampunk rings, steampunk fairy, that would be cool, a steampunk fairy. And so I started thinking, okay, if you have a fairy in a Victorian fantasy setting, what would they do? I thought, well, flying like a fighter pilot. So bomber pilot fairy is what I came up with the bomber helmet and the bomber jacket and all that. I make jewelry. I've done some wire wrapping. So wire wrapping seemed like an obvious choice to hold it together. It was a really easy way to make them. They look a lot harder than they were. All it basically cost me was a whole lot of poked fingers from the wire. Just held the rings together and wrapped the wire around them until they held solid. And I used the same technique to make the harness itself, just more wire wrapping. I sewed the flight helmet myself out of an old coat. This coat I bought back when I did one of my earliest costumes, and it has been donating leather to my costumes ever since. I think I managed to get the very last leather out of it I could today. The pattern for the helmet, I don't have a pattern for a flight helmet, but I have a wig head. So I just covered it in tape, drew my pattern onto the tape, and then cut the tape apart, and that gave me my pattern pieces. Fleece is what you would really need for accuracy, but I didn't have room. It was a little too snug for fleece, so I thought I'd line it with felt. So I went to the thrift store and bought a nice cashmere sweater and threw it in the washer to felt it. I washed it 5 times, it never felted, so I just lined it with the sweater anyway. The goggles are from the dollar store. They are actually a pair of light-up flashing glasses, which I cut the arms off of, and then I wrapped leather around the edges of the eyepieces and used some brads, paper studs. Those are very useful anywhere you want fake rivets. The lenses, the glasses did not originally have lenses, but I happened to have some eyeshadows that had the cosmetic containers had little lids that had glass in them. So I just stuck one lid in each hole and it worked perfectly. This costume took me about, a month or so to make, probably. It wasn't as labor intensive as some of my costumes. And that was a month working off and on, so not too bad. The pants, the boots, the shirt, and the coat all came from the thrift store. The corset is a pair of World War II military spats. just laced together, makes a good fake corset, and the rest of it was just bought. The gun is from the dollar store, just painted. It's a water pistol. That's one thing that I do is I go to thrift stores all the time and buy anything that looks like it'll be useful for a costume. I've had these pants in the attic for 10 years waiting for a costume. I've had the boots for 3 years. The spats have been hanging around for about 7 years. And if you have an attic full of rubbish, it's amazing what you can pull out of it.
Rubbish indeed. This just shows what kind of treasure can be created from someone else's so-called trash by a truly creative mind. You can learn more about Genevieve's creative work, including tutorials on several subjects at her website, entropyhouse.com/penwiper. Now that's what I call the right stuff. Until next time.